Welcome everyone to Stephen's session, incorporating mock market research projects in an online environment. Thank you for coming. Just a few housekeeping items I want to go over. You can chat on the right-hand side. Try to keep the chat positive. If there are any negative comments, they will be deleted. You can use hashtag ProfCon20 to engage with the session on Twitter, and you can also use that chat feature. There will be a giveaway for whoever is the most engaged, and the giveaway is for a $5 Dunkin' Donuts gift card. All right, Stephen Stromp is the Executive Director of Market Intelligence and Strategy at Davenport University in Michigan. He is also an adjunct marketing research, and business research instructor. Before his career in higher education, Stephen conducted market research for various industries, including healthcare, automotive, and consumer packaged goods. Stephen is the author of the Stu-Kent textbook, Market Research Essentials. All right, Stephen, I'll turn the time over to you.
Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome. My name is Stephen Stromp. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm really happy to be here. I've been, watching the last couple of days, and I'm especially happy to be here among so many marketing professionals and instructors. As a researcher, I kind of always feel like I'm on the sidelines cheering you on and kind of helping and giving information to help you make better decisions. But after watching these presentations, wow, you are already conducting a lot of research in your classes that aren't, called research, without the research courses. Even outside of the marketing research course, you're conducting a lot of research and integrating that in, which is really exciting for me to see. And I kind of feel, we're one team. I always felt, because there's just so much data that's available out there now, especially, with you can do Google Analytics, looking at what with Facebook, a lot of it's integrated already into what you are producing. So I think that's great to see marketers really get their hands dirty with data, because my whole career working in research and marketing go hand in hand. Actually, where every position that I've had, the research department was right next to the marketing department, and you really need that data on whatever creative piece you're developing. You need input. You need to find out what the correct marketing mode is, and so it really goes hand in hand. And that's what I tell my students too, is that synergy between the data component and the marketing component. And when I worked on the book for Stu-Kent, I really wanted to call it market research instead of marketing research, because with marketing it has that connotation that it's just your advertising and public relations, which is huge already, but to do market research, you're really analyzing all that plus the market. It's a little more broad, that encompasses really the whole product life cycle. So that's what I'm really passionate about, and that's what I talk to students about. So it's really exciting to see all the variety of different types of marketing and the courses that you're teaching and how you're integrating data into that. So I'm happy to be here. I feel very included. I don't just feel on the sidelines anymore as that research guy off to the side or the one person who teaches the research class. It's feeling like really integrated now going forward. So a little bit about my background before I continue. There we go. So as Camilla noted in my introduction, I do come from industry. So I started out my research career in healthcare. I worked for a large Michigan health system overseeing patient satisfaction, employee satisfaction, and new service line development research. So that's really where I got my start in research. I then went over to a consulting firm, which has since been bought out by Nielsen. So I don't really mention the name of the firm because it was pretty small, but everyone knows Nielsen. So when I was working there, so actually growing up, I just want to tell this quick story. I was a cereal aficionado. I love the sugary cereals, Pop-Tarts, but I love like Fruit Loops, Apple Jacks, all that stuff. So when I actually began working for the consulting firm, I was so excited because one of my projects that we won was the Kellogg account. And I really thought I made it when I was doing testing on different formulas of Fruit Loops. So I was able to, do testing. They were doing the changing formulas, switching out different vitamins and minerals to see, was there a change in taste testing in whether or not these other ingredients would make a difference. So was it at parity, or were there statistical differences between the different formulas? So that I just thought that was the coolest thing. I thought my career could not go any better after this point, right? So then I also started getting into higher education research as well, working with doing a lot of brand perception study work with universities. And so my forte, or what I became sort of an expert in, was survey development. And so from working on those accounts, that's how I actually got hired in at Davenport University. So I came into the academic world from a back door through research. So I did research, with firms and with different consulting firms, but I was hired to go in to do research full time for Davenport University. So I really didn't start adjuncting. I was interested in it, and I was asked to adjunct around 2013 is when I started. And so then I was invited to redesign for Davenport the marketing research course, the online version of that. And so that's really what I want to talk about today, is that process and all the decisions that went into that, and kind of the pros and cons looking at a research project and making sure that we have that research project integrated into the course. And then, of course, also I was asked by Stu Kent to be the author of Market Research Essentials. So it's just kind of all coming together. So I'm really excited to be here. So when we look at market research projects in a course, first of all, I really want to have a comprehensive market research project, no matter how it's being implemented. You really want that in your course. So my goal to mimic as much as you can real world, if not real world for real, right, with clients. So my goal in this presentation is really to examine the pros and cons of various project components. So what I really should have titled this project is Incorporating Mock Market Research Projects in a 7-week accelerated format while weighing the pros and cons of team versus individual projects, as well as project breadth and project depth. But that would be a crazy title. It wouldn't fit on the title slide, and I don't think Stu Kent would have liked that. It's long enough. But really, that's what I did in order to help redesign this course and bring it online. And I started with this presentation pre-COVID. So what was interesting was just how much more relevance this has post-COVID with a lot of these courses, or all of these courses, at least for the short term, last semester, and maybe potentially being pulled in the fall and going back online. Higher education is just being really nimble. So this is really a timely topic, especially related to market research. So, like I said, I was charged with our marketing department chair to help redesign the course, and I knew we had to figure some things out to bring what I was doing in seat online. So really think of this as a case study. So I don't have all the answers, but I will tell you what I found worked and what didn't work. And then it'd be great to have a discussion on how you're doing this, or some feedback. What I've implemented, what I'm about to show you, we've ran for about 1 or 2 semesters, 1 or 2 sessions. So it's still relatively new, and we're learning along the way. But I do want to share with you what we've learned so far. So what did I do when I was in seat? So starting point was our in seat classes are 15 weeks, and I was running them as team projects. When I was teaching more in seat, I was running them as team projects and with an experiential learning client. So you may have different terms for it. We call it experiential learning. Really, that's just a real client that's out in industry or nonprofits. So we were pairing with an external client. So what I really wanted to do was make sure that the project flow of a professional research project was followed for the students. And so these roughly align to our learning outcomes as well, very high level holistically, such as defining the research objective. Clients will come in and say, they don't come in with what their actual research objectives are a lot of the times. They'll come in with, I need a focus group, I need a survey, I need you to look up these stats, things like that, which is really not where you want to start. What's the question? What's the problem? So getting students to help tease that out from a client. Learning how to develop proposals and give real-time estimates back on cost and timing. Conducting secondary research, so that's very important. What are the proper sources? Making sure that we cite, that's very important with secondary research. I also want them to learn about primary research methods, which methods map to which research objectives properly, or would be the most effective, and then determine that primary research method. And if it's a survey, and I try to always make sure we have a survey, because a survey is the #1 most popular quantitative primary research method. So we really want them to engage in how to develop proper questions so there's no biases, you get the flow right, and it matches what the objectives are. A sampling plan, how do we go about, if we are doing a survey, how do we get a proper sampling plan so that we can be confident in the results? How to distribute a survey, so we're looking at software, such as Qualtrics. Data analysis, how do we analyze all this information we're getting back, whether it be secondary or primary survey data. And then of course communicating results, which actually marketing students are very good. They're better than most at communicating the results because they do have more of a background in the writing, although I was looking at some of the chats in the last session which were talking about the need for some more communication and writing skills. So basically it's following the professional project of what I'm used to in industry, getting these requests that we want to duplicate in the actual course. So one thing I would do is pair. So we didn't transition this piece online until later, but one thing I would do is when I was teaching 15-week in the classroom is pair with those actual clients, right? So I had really good luck pairing with nonprofit animal rescues, because just like with my love for sugary cereals, I also have a kind of a passion for animal rescues. Spay and neuter. I'm like a Bob Barker. Let's keep the the unwanted pet population down so they're not euthanized. So I was already plugged into kind of this, industry, if you will, this nonprofit industry in our area. So I was plugged in, but I did hear some from some other talks that nonprofits are low-hanging fruit, which I totally agree. And don't be afraid to go after some of the marketing agencies because they need research help too. Nonprofits just worked really well for me, but I will heed that advice. I think that's great advice. Go for some, shoot for some of the firms so that they can, up the ante. But even with just the nonprofits, as you can see, I had a really broad spectrum of a sample of research projects just within these particular areas. So we can look through all of these different types of projects, and there's really a great breadth here. And my problem was, which I'm already getting into some of the cons of this, which I think, again, my message is if you can go forward with a true client, with a real experiential learning client, do it. But there are some pros and cons to both a mock project and an experiential learning project. So for the sample of research projects, I wanted to get in, all of those learning outcomes. So I went to Carol of Carol's Sparrows, and I said, what do you have going on? So from her conversation, I said, okay, great. Let's do a donor engagement, a volunteer satisfaction, and new service development. We did 3 of those studies in one semester, which was a great crash course for students, but it ran me ragged. It was very, it was very time intensive, and it also overburdened the client. So that was my first mistake is, kind of go slow, pick 1 or 2 projects. And I guess my advice there is, not all of these projects fit with all of the learning outcomes. If I just do a satisfaction survey, I'm not going to really be able to do all of the things I want to do with some of those other learning outcomes that are in the course. Maybe it's just a piece of it and the other can be filled in with different assignments. So I think that's where I failed the first semester. Even though it was a great semester, I think everyone felt exhausted at the end of it. So the next time that Carol Sparrows came up again, she's like, I do want to partner with you. That was awesome. It was great, but can we just focus on one this semester? I'm like, absolutely. I feel the same way. We were both very tired. But I do want to recommend, before I move on, there is a presentation from from Karen Sutherland on how to pair with real clients in social media courses, but I think it can relate to marketing research courses as well. There is a link there if you want to jot that down. It's very easy, stukent.com/webinars, and you can just search for either her name or that title. And there's some great advice if you want to learn how to pair with those students or with those corporations. So what were all the client touch points? So I had to really identify, when do I need to bring the client in? And the client, so defining the research objective, and this was really crucial because it was really helping the students learn how to interact with clients, how to define that research objective, because it's never, you think it's clear, but it's never really clear until after the end of that first meeting. And then we have the sampling plan. So we need the sample from so I've had some experiential learning where the sample just fell through, like they didn't have it. So it was supposed to be an email survey and we're ready to go, and they give me snail mail addresses. I'm like, I cannot do a snail mail study within the scope of the weeks of this project. It's just not going to work. So that's something, that we have to work out with the client. We also need the client to approve what we're sending out, to their stakeholders. We need to make sure that that's appropriate. And we also need to have them back in for the presentation, which is always a great experience to have, students be on their feet, get asked questions from the client. So these are really all the touch points that I had identified with the clients that I had worked with. And again, I try to always do a survey. So a lot of these are survey centric, just because the survey covers all of those learning outcomes that we want to have. So the student benefits, so I went back into my course evaluations when I was doing these projects in seat with clients, and you can see, we don't have time to read them all here, but one of my favorite comments are related to really that client interaction. And if you look at the comment on the bottom left, what really worked well for me was the presentations, or where the presentations should be. We learned how to answer client questions, even though we didn't always have a slide regarding the question. So I was really pleased with that, because we did a lot of prep on a client's going to throw you a curveball in a meeting. They're going to ask you a question. They're going to ask you, did you slice and dice the data this way? What does it look like? What is it telling us? They're going to ask you all kinds of methodology questions. So prepping students for that kind of unknown. So what we would do is we would have a speaker take a certain portion, and if they got a question, and they didn't know it, have the other person in the group kind of scramble to look for that question. Never say I don't know and leave it at that, right? You want to at least say we'll get back to you if we can't find it right here. But just that interaction, being able to be on your toes with a client is invaluable. We got so many comments about that as you see some of them here. So what I really want to say is, and what we've learned from ProfCon too, from some of the other speakers, is experiential learning projects or working with a real client is really preferred. I really do. I don't want to say that that's not the preferred way. I really think it is, but it's not perfect. And I think that all of us who have been through these projects know that they're not perfect. So some of the things that I noted when I was doing, I really felt like I was managing a mini consulting firm doing these projects. And you truly are. You have, your students are your workers. They're the team doing the projects, and you're really facilitating a lot of the work between the client and the students. So the client, on the other hand, really expects that A level. They want something they can implement, and we all know that students are kind of on a scale. So your A students will deliver. But some will take the C, some will take the B, and just be, I can't fire them. They're still on the team, right? So I found myself sometimes having to get the project up to snuff before it gets passed off, the final version to the client. There might be by the time we get done, there might be some data errors in there, or some, even typos that I don't really want I don't really want the client to, pass out those electronic copies to per staff when there are, some issues with that it has the logo of our university on it, right? Even though it's a student project and they're aware of that, we want it to be, top level work. And most of the time we can get there. So the breadth and depth of the projects also can be lacking. So like I said, if you just have, they just want to do, I have a lot of time, we're going to do an event. We just want you to do the post-event survey. So we already have the survey from last year. So can you just, we'll give you the data. Can you just analyze the results of this post-event survey? And I think that is great. I think, that's a great exercise to look at a post-event survey, do the data analysis. That ticks a couple boxes right off our learning outcomes, but it doesn't cover survey development. It doesn't cover working with the client. So those are some of the drawbacks. It's just these kind of one-off studies that we want to be helpful with and can integrate into the class, but it may not fulfill all the obligations. On their end, and another or on our end. Another thing is the timing of the project may not line up with the course timing. So we've ran into that a lot, where it's just they're not going to have the information we need to proceed with the project until the middle of the semester, which could be okay. You could then maybe have the students pick it up the next semester, but again, just working through all those learning outcomes is difficult. And then finally, I've also had where clients, like my example with the snail mail list, they don't always fulfill the obligations on their end, so things could fall through the cracks in your I've had a whole project just wiped out, and we had to pull in another project at the last minute just because the client couldn't uphold their obligations on their end. So those are just some considerations. So thinking of those as we go online, I was asked to redesign the online marketing course, and I think Linda's here. Linda Goulet is our department chair of marketing at Davenport University. So what I wanted to do was take the portions of the project that I developed in Seat and just make sure that they got online, because I think they were really valuable. And those are those items that I covered in the, those higher learning objectives. The thing is, our online courses are 7 weeks. They're in an accelerated format. So I'm already down from 15 weeks to 7 weeks. And our in-seat was team projects. So we had to make the decision, do we want team or individual projects going forward? And then do we try to bring in that experiential learning client, or do we do a mock project? So those were kind of what I was up against thinking through this. So let's go through a little bit of my thought process. And then again, I do want to have time at the end to talk about what your process or what your thoughts would be. So the benefits of the team project, it duplicates real world project teams. So now we're getting into team versus individual, which is great. And our university is really big on kind of duplicating that in a lot of courses. What works, you're always going to be on a team where people have different strengths and weaknesses, and how do you work around that? So I think that is a good way to duplicate that, is in a team project. It also helps, let's just be honest, with ease and instructor management. If I have 23 in the class, maybe I only have to grade 3 to 4 projects versus, all 23 or 30 plus, right? And a lot of students do like that. So I'm working with my group for this. So the service aspect of the class was a great experience. This is a quote. I enjoyed working with my teammates. So that, we do have a lot of synergy with the teams. So what can go wrong with teams? You're probably already aware of all these because you've been through these, but the drawbacks of the team project, and what really bothers me sometimes, is the divide and conquer is great. We do that in the real world. You take this piece, I'll take this piece, but the learning objectives do suffer a bit, because usually one person will do the survey construction. Even though I say I want them to all be involved in it, it really usually falls on 1 or 2 students in the group. And then really at the end, I'm thinking, did they really learn how to produce a well-constructed survey? I really want them to learn that on the way out. And I just don't know, because there's, the survey was constructed. There's assignments, of course, that you can do to help, supplement that, and quizzes. But for the project, sometimes I don't know. So these are just some negative comments about group work. I don't think these are any different from what you would see at your university, but just that feeling of, I'm pulling more weight, and the other students aren't learning as much, and I'm really dragging some of the low performing team members along. I think that's pretty common. I experienced that when I was doing my MBA coursework too, some of those feelings. So I think that's natural. That's something that I do consider. So then client versus mock project. So could all facets of the client project be brought into an online environment? And in today's world, sure. You could put in Zoom and have the client for all those touch points check in. I think it could work. It could be brought into an online environment, but we also then have all those drawbacks that I talked about. And when we're looking at a 7-week period, at least in our case, it's really exacerbated. So everything is exacerbated. Those potential problems that you might have with a real world client will be exacerbated in that 7-week time frame. To throw in another wrench, our online courses are mostly pre-designed course format. We follow Quality Matters template. So for best practices, so we do have, they're pretty much locked in. So the ability to swiftly change some things around may not work so well when you have kind of more of a lockdown format for your online courses or NC courses for that matter. So those are some of the issues for that. So I talked about all the benefits and positives of of working with real world clients, but there are some benefits of a mock project as well, which I think we should consider. So we can really have some assurance that the project that we develop will map to course outcomes. I can also make sure that the project is very similar to what I experienced in industry, right? So when I'm developing projects or working with clients in industry, I can mirror what happens in the course a little bit better than maybe just a little piece of a small project that I'm getting from a client that they might need help on, but it's just going to be kind of a one-off thing where they just need some results analyzed, which is still great, but it might not cover the whole scope. It's more manageable, of course, in online or accelerated formats. And what I really like is, and you could still do this piece too with a real world client, is parts of the project can be predictably chunked out and defined by week. So I really try to overlay what is going to happen with the course assignment. So they're just getting so 1 week they're doing survey design, but they're also getting a pre-quiz on survey design to make sure that they've read the textbook. And they're also going to be getting an assignment related to survey design before they go into their project work on survey design. So it's your client may be on a different time frame, so it may confuse students a little bit more than necessary. So that's one reason why I really like doing that with a mock project. So client versus mock project. So what are the drawbacks of the mock project? Again, that one quote just kills me that we lose that with the mock project, is that loss of real world client interaction. Actually presenting to a client, or more important to me, is really the upfront defining the research objectives, because you're going to have garbage in, garbage out, right? So just learning how to handle clients and get really what are those research objectives, what's the research question that we really need to focus on, and then of course that being on your toes and when the client asks tough questions, that's really hard to replicate in a mock project. Defining objectives is lost, at least the way that, so I really like to predefine the objectives and give them the objectives in a mock study, because it's going to follow the flow, right? I want to make sure that we have secondary research as a part of the research objective, that it lends itself to secondary research so they get some experience there. I want to make sure that it lends itself to some form of qualitative primary research, such as a focus group or observational research. Then I really want to also make sure that there's quantitative research in there. So really kind of it's a quite large project that would cover all these facets. So in a mock project, I really want that predefined for them. So when we get to the mock project, you'll see I just have them select, of a list of 6 projects, which one do you want to do? So the report and presentation, another drawback is that the report and presentation lose their stakes. If you are if you're presenting to a client, it really needs to be that A level, right? But we may not get there with the students just because it's a little deflated, right? They know that I'm just reading it and it's not a real client. Maybe they'll get some peer reviews, but there's nothing like that. A real client is reading this, and you just really get energized and want to make sure that you do your best work. So the decision ultimately bringing this into an online 7-week accelerated course was to work with an individual mock project. We thought that was the easiest way to bring it in and not do experiential learning. But again, this has been, it's more than a pilot. We've been running it now for a couple sessions, and so this is kind of what I've learned and how I developed it. So the type of research project that I think fits the best, where I can do all those methodologies that we want to cover. So ones that I do want to cover in the textbook or in the course is brand study, like, what's the brand awareness, what's your brand perception. Stakeholder and satisfaction engagement is another one that's pretty common, but I really like to focus on that new product development, because that gets you all the way from, concept design all the way through advertising, right? And how you might go forward with advertising. It really fills in public relations. It really fills a lot of the gaps in, because with a new product, you need to think through all of those phases. So again, just going through new product development really checks the boxes of a lot of those learning outcomes and fits the project mold well. So how did I do that? So I developed, and this actually, a lot of these are in the, if you're using a StuKent textbook, these are fleshed out in the StuKent courseware as well. But here's an example of how I did that. So, I developed new product development scenarios with different real companies, but they're fake projects that they're interested in looking into bringing these products online. So that there's a lot of competitive research out there that students can glisten. There's a lot of, it lends itself to primary research as well as secondary research, as well as qualitative and quantitative. So we're looking for, so for the Canon example, they're looking to get into a consumer-based security, camera option. And what are the most desirable functions? What do consumers expect to pay? What does the competitive landscape look like? So I'm not really spoon-feeding them what the methodologies are, but they lend themselves well to all of those that I previously mentioned, just so that we can cover them in the comprehensive project. So what I want to do really quickly is go through what does the first step in the project is them picking one of these scenarios. And I put the wheel graphic around there because I rotate these scenarios by semester, just to help with students from one semester sharing their project with students to the next semester. So they are rotated, and I'm adding new ones all the time, and I do share them in the courseware as well when I develop them. So there's just a variety of new product development concepts out there that work well for this. So this is an actual student doing the secondary research portion, and what I have them do is develop an infographic, and we use a lot of our library happens to be, we're blessed with a lot of databases, and Mergent Intellect is a big one. We use a lot of different ways to get some of this. So I'm pushing students to use some of those resources for secondary research, not just Googling. And so this is where a lot of this comes from. And I'm okay with them copying and pasting some charts and graphs, as long as they're citing their sources and hitting all what the client needs, right? So they're starting to do some secondary research on this particular one with, desired features on camera. So this isn't perfect, but I like this one. Some of the biggest competitors, I would have liked to have seen, a little bit of market share information in there rather than just maybe the top 6, but, pretty good job of pulling this information together. The next thing I want them to do is develop a survey draft. So the survey draft is, I like to, a lot of times this is where students fall apart, because we tell them to, hit these things in the survey, but we don't really give them examples or walk them through what should be included in a survey. What are the sections? So I like to give them, for a new product development survey, these are some examples, and these are really the sections that you should have in the survey. So this is the next step that they conduct. There's also another step where I have them do a moderator's guide for a focus group that I didn't include here, but that could be something that that's another step in the project. Whether you do a mock focus group in your class, or just have them develop the moderator's guide and get feedback in a discussion question format is great too. So I have them do the survey draft in Word. And then I have them do where they're actually programming that survey in Qualtrics. And the reason I have it as a 2-step is survey development is garbage in, garbage out if it's not designed properly, right? So I like having separate iterations where they're getting robust feedback from me before they go forward and really thinking about tool development. So I put a few steps in here. Even in a 7-week accelerated class, you really want a set list. Then we launch the survey, and I have them develop. So what I'm trying to do here is bring in some real world aspects. So I have them develop a survey and come up with a sampling plan, but think of pretend you're sending your semester project to a scientifically calculated sample, and then have them work out actually what that sample size statement would be, even though it's a mock project and they'll be sending it to their sample of family and friends. We really want them to bring some of those real world aspects in where we can. And I do some of that on the discussion board or just bake it right into the project. Report criteria, so it's following, what a basic market research report would be, what should be included. And here's some examples of what the students came up with. So not too bad. I will, there's some things I would tweak here if I could go back and forth. I spend a lot of time on survey development if I am teaching, survey as the quantitative portion, just because, again, it's so important to have that survey tool correct to begin with. I would love some more time to get more feedback to the students on the report, which I had in the 15-week, which I don't have in the 7-week quite as well. So here's just another example, using qualitative open-ended data to create word clouds, using, what the client asked, what were the top features, that they should include in a new product development. So we want to make sure that gets in there. And again, some segmentation. So what are preferences of these different options by gender? And we do cover some statistical testing in there. So for the student feedback, it was very overwhelmingly positive these last 2 times. Now, I don't want to rig this and have you think that, you're just picking out the positive comments. Believe me, there were negative comments or areas for improvement about me specifically in my things I could improve on in teaching. But for the project, there were, it was overwhelmingly positive, including, so I was happy to see the scores and the comments really talk about how interactive it was, how real world it felt, even though it was a mock project. So as we can see through some of these comments, we really were able to achieve that. And I think I have a second slide here as well. So what I really want to point out here is also the feedback along the way really made a big difference as well. So giving robust feedback through each step of the project, through each week, which a lot of us instructors do, but students really pick up on that. You got to act like you're in a consulting firm and not be too, students might start to get offended, but a lot of students who are really into this love getting that feedback. They love learning, hey, you should really, this chart doesn't work for this type of data. You really need to fix that before it would go out to a client. And they just learn so much more from that. So what did I learn? What were the, after we've, launched this, what do I learn? So real world projects can be simulated and in some instances map even better to the course outcomes. So I did find, without having the client there, I was able, what I lost was, and again, in those positive comments, they didn't know what was lost here, right? They didn't know, I'm not getting any comments saying, the client interaction and being able to develop the research methodology along with the client, I love that because it's missing, right? Or presenting to a client was really what I love. So we get positive comments, but they're different, right? We are missing something there. So real world projects can be simulated and you can really trigger it to map to course outcomes. But again, that client interaction cannot be easily replicated and will likely be, that's going to be sacrificed if you do that. So what I found also is breaking project into phases that follow the weekly learning outcomes really helps with comprehension. And we did see that in some of the comments. So again, I start out with a pre-quiz that goes over the topic, then an assignment that covers the topic, and then they actually apply that into the project. And that's done in chunks throughout the week. And that really just makes a big difference for comprehension. So what were some of the other things that I learned is reinforce the concepts before. So this is what I just talked about. Learn the concepts, practice the concepts, and then demonstrate the concepts with the project. And I don't know, have any of you heard of so back when I was in high school in the 90s, there was a big push, I think, by the Bush administration to include courses in high school that were outcomes-based. Have you heard of outcomes-based education? It's kind of gone away a little bit, but what I really picked up from outcomes-based education was the focus on that continuous improvement and mastery. So I always try to pick something in a course where I where they have to get an A before they can continue, basically. So it's, for my course, I make it be the survey development. If I had more time, it would be the survey, it would be the report, the end report and recommendations to the client, which I try to do a little bit, but in 7 weeks, it's tough. If I had and that does also help replicate what a real client you would interact with a real client where you have to deliver an A. And the reason I do that is I'm like, nope, you need to make these changes before you can go forward, and keep sending it back to them and not letting them go forward until that survey is perfect. So that would be something where we want to get that continuous improvement, that mastery. And even though we might not be able to do it on all projects because it would take a lot of time, we should pick 1 or 2 key components that we really want them to learn. Otherwise, the project's going to fall apart, right? Even if it's a mock project. And then again, providing that robust feedback. I really try to go overboard in the feedback to really let them know what's acceptable and not acceptable if this project was in a real world situation. So future ideas, and I want to hear from you, and I see there's some comments or questions over here, is a couple of my ideas, then I want to hear yours. But one idea I have, maybe to bring that in, is melding client projects with mock projects. So are there pieces that we can bring in, even in an online environment, where students or where clients could put these projects into different assignments. Instead of swap out an assignment, here's a real database from a client, and really all they need is you to analyze the data. That could possibly be swapped out or integrated with the mock projects. And one note I do want to say is this format is now being used not only in seat, we're also using it or online, we're also using it in seat. So we're doing these mock projects the same fashion in an in-seat. That doesn't mean we're rejecting experiential learning projects, but if we don't get an experiential learning project, we are running it with these mock projects. Another idea I had was offering like opt-in projects to clients. So if we're saying we are doing a new product development study in our course, if you want to opt in and do this, and put your new idea through this new product development lens that we're working with a research project, let us know, and we, instead of doing the Canon example with the security camera that I went through, we'll pop in your study, and then the client will have actual real data that they can use on the back end. So that's one idea I'd love to try out. We could swap it out with some other studies too. And I didn't know if I was allowed to say this, but I think the next evolution really is into doing this digital simulation. If you were listening to the opening remarks by Stu, he announced that I am actually working with doing this very project, doing these project scenarios in a simulation. So it will be very similar to, so maybe that's the next evolution. And we saw what the how much people preferred, or students preferred, simulation versus kind of other forms of learning. So maybe that is the next evolution. So it will have things like, you're given these different project scenarios, and they, some lend themselves better to focus groups. Are students able to identify which types of projects go with which types of learning or research objectives, going through that. Also, maybe, a focus group actually watching clips of focus groups where they're being moderated, and can you pick out what is the synergy of the focus group? What are kind of some of those top ideas that are bubbling to the top in the focus group? So that could be another way to incorporate a really close to possible with a client, but in a contained in a contained simulation. And then I'm thinking you could run that simulation as a practice, even if you have a client, and go through it that way. So that's just an idea. So I'm going to turn it over and read maybe, or if Camilla wants to come on and summarize maybe some of the questions that didn't get answered or ones that we want to discuss, if we have a minute or two, that would be great. Otherwise, I'm available online. My LinkedIn is available here. I know it's not a link, but you can easily find me just with my name on LinkedIn.
So it looks like we don't have time for a Q&A now, but I've recorded all of the questions people have had, and we will get those to you and answer them for the people who asked them.
Okay, that sounds great. Sorry, guys, I went a little long, but yeah, I will definitely get back any unanswered questions.
It was great. So before I forget, I'll announce the winner of the $5 Dunkin' Donuts gift card, and that is Eric Riney. So congratulations. Someone from our team will send that to you soon. Thank you for your awesome tips about incorporating projects, Stephen. Thank you again for doing this session for us.
Thank you. Have a good day, everybody, and I'll be in touch.